The stars at night are big and bright.
TLEV Media, bringing the magic of the theme parks to your home.
From vlogs to interviews, TLEV Media is entertainment for all.
What is up, horror enthusiasts? My name is Thomas from TLEV Media, hitting you all with 2 new maze announcements for today for Halloween Horror Nights. Now, it seems like as we're getting closer and closer to these events, we're going to be seeing some more and more pairing. These 2 properties, however, are going to be shared from both Hollywood and Orlando. But before I dive into these 2 announcements, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell to be notified with every single HHN news update we have on this channel. So, for both Hollywood and Orlando, we see the 2 intellectual properties of Universal Monsters, The Bride of Frankenstein Lives, and the return of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So let's dive in with the one that I'm most excited for, and that is The Bride of Frankenstein Lives. The Bride of Frankenstein Lives was actually a maze at Orlando last year during their HHN Light event. Of course, this was during COVID time, so it didn't have a full, expansive maze. No one really filmed it, but from what I gathered from watching videos and reactions, it was a really fun maze. Very different though from the storyline that Universal Monsters established here in Hollywood, and I'll dive into that a little bit more, but first let's read what exactly the press release had to say about The Bride of Frankenstein Lives. At its core, Halloween Horror Nights is an extension of the horror film legacy originated by Universal Pictures, and the event continues to honor its blockbuster history with a haunted maze highlighting the one of the studio's most sinister creatures, the Bride of Frankenstein. Universal Monsters' The Bride of Frankenstein Lives picks up where the 1935 classic film The Bride of Frankenstein left off, thrusting guests into chaos as the bride becomes an unstoppable scientist and begins her mission to revive Frankenstein's monster. Her unwavering quest to find eternal life will come at a cost, and guests will soon find themselves entwined in a frenzied battle in their daring attempt to escape. Universal Monsters, The Bride of Frankenstein Lives. So this is going to be very interesting for us here in Hollywood. So the 1935 film, The Bride of Frankenstein, is a direct sequel to the 1931 classic Frankenstein. In that movie, a lot of the most memorable scenes that are associated with Frankenstein actually come from The Bride of Frankenstein. The smoking scene with the blind priest, even the scene that we saw at the end of the first iteration of Universal Monsters here at Hollywood, the We Belong Dead, this iconic finale where we see Frankenstein still stitching together the Bride of Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster pulling the lever that explodes the castle. We even saw the aftermath in Universal Monsters Wolfman versus Frankenstein. We saw in the second maze the castle in shambles. We even saw the bride, albeit a little more crispy version of the bride in the second maze than we saw in the first maze. But it seems like, at least from the trailer, a lot of that story is going to be pushed to the side. We're not creating this Universal Monsters narrative anymore. In fact, it seems like from that press release, the focus is going to be more on this iteration of the bride, the one from 1935, who was only on the screen for less than 5 minutes before she was blown to smithereens. This version is also going to align with more of what we saw in Universal Monsters, but in HHN Orlando's version, where we saw the Hunchback of Notre Dame, where we saw the creature from the Black Lagoon. These versions were, while they came from the same concepts as we had here in Hollywood, they very much presented a different narrative. And we can see that in the trailer that this bride is going to be one that's a little less crispy, a little less cooked as the one that we're used to. And that's going to be so fun to see. And I'm really excited to see this version. I'm a little bummed that we're not continuing the story of the Universal Monsters universe that we had here in Hollywood. But to see these characters, especially to see Dracula's brides against the Bride of Frankenstein and her quest, and the storyline is that she's using Dracula's blood to bring back eternal life for Frankenstein's monster. This is going to be an epic showdown, and I'm incredibly excited to see this at both parks. Future Thomas here. I'm still editing the video, but John Murray just made the announcement that for here in Hollywood, it is going to be slightly different, The Bride of Frankenstein, than it is going to be in Orlando, because Slash is coming to score Universal Monsters once again. Super excited. I need more songs to add to my workout playlist, so this is definitely going to be part of that. So just wanted to insert that. All right, back to previous Thomas. Now, it seems like, from our speculations, more than likely, this is going to be the maze located in the Parisian courtyard. I speculated that that was going to be Mary Shelley's Frankenstein book, and it seems like now that we have this property, it would only make sense to continue that be the placement of this property. Now, from one familiar face to another, let's start to talk about the second announcement, which was Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is synonymous with Halloween Horror Nights. We've seen this property many times in the past 7 years. And in every version that we've seen, either in the tram or in a maze or in a house, it's always been a fun ride to go through this property. The scares never get old. Are they a little more predictable? Sure, but there's still a lot to enjoy when we're going through the Sawyer house and we're going through the slaughterhouse and we're being chased by Leatherface trying to put his Leatherface on my face. It's going to be a fun ride for sure, but let's talk what the press release has to say about the return of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Inspired by the 1974 iconic slasher film, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the Halloween Horror Nights mazes will depict a harrowing and intense experience as guests try to outrun the maniacal Leatherface and his unrelenting chainsaw. Guests will embark on a killer journey through a series of familiar scenes from the film and eventually fall victim to a family of cannibals. From a dilapidated gas station to an eerie old farmhouse, they will witness unimaginable horrors around every corner, soon discovering that nowhere is safe from the demented Leatherface. Interestingly enough, this is going to be based on the 1974 film, not its sequels as we've seen in Blood Brothers, or we've also seen different iterations. It does seem a little bit interesting that this is going to be returning. I know that some people in the community might be disappointed in this announcement. I'm not particularly disappointed if this meant that we're going to be getting some of the other properties such as The Haunting of Hill House, because Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they've done it so many times. I'm sure that the budget for Texas Chainsaw Massacre was so much lower than the other houses because they were able to just reuse the same props that they've been using for the past 5 to 7 years that they've been doing this. I much prefer the Texas Chainsaw Massacre maze over the House of a Thousand Corpses maze, so I'm okay with this coming back. Will we be able to chant "Grandpa, Grandpa, Grandpa" like we have done in previous iterations? Of course we will be doing that, and it's going to be fun. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because the property has been done so many times, the scares don't really stick as they would in a maze that is completely brand new. So it's more of like a hangout. It's familiar, seeing old friends. So in that sense, I am excited to be seeing the return of some familiar faces. But I'm even more excited for the return of the Bride in this new version. So, speculation. I believe that the Bride will be showing this brand new story. Once again, we saw with the Bride, Dracula's bride lunging at the Bride as she's trying to bring back Frankenstein's monster. However, the mask does show Frankenstein's monster as he appeared in Universal Monsters. Again, same concept was used in both versions, so I'm not surprised that it looks so familiar to see the Frankenstein's face like that. The Bride, again, very different version, very different look than she was last time she was here in Hollywood, and that's okay. We accept and we adapt and we love change here at TLEV. We're gonna be seeing the same scenes in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but again, that's gonna be fun, it's gonna be familiar. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I'm now assuming that's what is in the Mummy queue, just because of what we've seen in terms of the layout. It does seem like that would be the most appropriate place to have it. Parisian Courtyard, Mary Shelley's book. Again, those are speculations though, it has not been confirmed, unless by the time that I upload this, John Murray has confirmed the locations. Now there's one thing along with these announcements that I do want to bring up that I think is very important in the development of the shared intellectual property and the shared mazes. We saw in the announcement today that in the press release, they elaborate that in addition to these two mazes coming to HHN Orlando, Beetlejuice was also going to be there. Very specific that it was to HHN Orlando, no mention to HHN Hollywood. So I think that this provides more fuel to the fire that Beetlejuice is not actually coming to Halloween Horror Nights here at Universal Studios Hollywood. It's a bit of a bummer. That was one thing that I was looking forward to the most. I know that in HHN Light last year, when they had it in Orlando, it was very much well received, which is why I was excited to have it here on this side of the country. But oh well, all the more reason why we have to go to HHN Orlando this year. Let me know in the comment section down below, what do you think of these two announcements? Is there one that you're more excited for than the other? It's pretty obvious as to which of these properties I'm a little more excited for to see. But again, Halloween Horror Nights is back in full swing. Super excited to see both versions in Hollywood and in Orlando and their adaptations of these intellectual properties. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you like this video, make sure to hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, or if you're new to YouTube, thank you so much for this being your first video to ever watch. But make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell for even more of our content. All the good stuff, all of our links in the description down below, our social media. If you want to support the channel, Buy Me a Coffee is down there below. We've talked about that in the past. And of course, I'm Thomas. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the slaughterhouse.